ANZCCJ Sports for Business special event. I am Matthew Walker, co-chair of the Sports for Business committee with Ian Scott, the other co-chair. I'm just really glad that everyone could join us today. We have some really special guests for this CEO webinar, Paralympics Australia and New Zealand, Tokyo 2021. I couldn't be prouder. I'd like to introduce in a moment Peter Gibson, the Executive Advisor, Tokyo 2020 Paralympics Australia member. But before I do, I just would like to, we have a large group tuned in today and would encourage everyone, there'll be a Q&A session some time later on to ask our special guests questions. So please submit your questions early to avoid disappointment. So without further ado, over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Ian, very much. And first of all, may I shout out for a very big congratulations to everybody who's joined us. And we were just speaking beforehand, this is an unprecedented number of people who have actually joined into a webinar of this style, and I certainly hope it's the first, and I certainly hope it's not going to be the last, as we intend to run a couple of these more before we head towards and into Tokyo 2021 and the Paralympic Games. Just a very quick one, please make sure that you get your questions in as early as you can, as Matthew said. And before we go into the introduction of our special guests today, and our CEOs of New Zealand, Paralympics Australia and Paralympics New Zealand, we'd like to show you a couple of quick videos. The first one is going to be on the Paralympics Australia, followed by a quick overview of our first guest speaker, and then a second one from Paralympics New Zealand and the bio for Fiona Allan also. So if all of our IT works correctly, and I certainly hope it does, I'll ask Emily to start the video.
We can't hear you, Peter.
Peter, you're on mute, mate.
So that was my fault. I beg your pardon. I was on mute. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us. We have an incredible cross-section of attendees today, right across every part of the Australia, New Zealand, Japan relationship, being it corporate, government, media, or community. And it's really great to see everybody. So I'd like to introduce our very first guest, CEO and Chief Executive of the Paralympics Australia. Lynne Anderson was appointed the Chief Executive of Paralympics Australia in 2015. And if I can paraphrase Lynne, it was her dream job that landed in her lap. The APC was renamed Paralympics Australia in 2019. Before joining the APC, Lynne was Managing Director Australia and New Zealand for Repucom, a global leader in sports marketing research. She started her career as a marketing manager for the Canterbury Bulldogs rugby league club before setting up her own sponsorship research community with ESCOM Australia and New Zealand. Lynne has 30 years experience helping all sectors of the industry in sports, sponsors, government and media. And Lynne is currently chair of the Canterbury Bulldogs Rugby League Club. She's also deputy chair of the Parramatta Stadium Trust. Former board roles also include the World Masters Games in Melbourne 2002, Camp Quality, Gold Coast Titans, NRL Club, and the Museum of Applied Arts and Scientists. And also, and very importantly, the Invictus Games in Sydney 2018. I'd like to welcome Lynne very quickly, and then we will go straight to our second video, if we can, which will be from our counterparts across the ditch in New Zealand. No good there. We had a little bit of problem, do we, Emily?
Sorry, Peter, just some technical difficulties. We'll just try again.
Okay, thanks.
One moment, sorry.
I do apologise, everybody. There, so thanks again. I think we might have had a few technical difficulties there, so I do apologise. But we will go straight into the body of today's webinar with our special guests. So again, welcoming Lynne and Fiona. I'd like to start off, and I suppose as we said, we're going to be short for time, but I'd really like to start off with Lynne, and then we're going to sort of tic-tac between Lynne and Fiona about a few things. So the postponement. Lynne, I hope you're there. So the postponement, Once we're now all off our mutes, has brought a number of challenges. As you can see, the date has changed, but the dream hasn't. The Australian team working as hard as ever. What's your view on it? And we'll cover a few other details as we go through today.
Thanks, Peter, and thank you everyone for allowing us an opportunity today to talk about our beautiful Paralympic movement. One thing I did want to put on the table straight away when we're talking about the fact that the Games have been postponed, we are just in awe of the task that the Japanese government, the Tokyo Organising Committee, the International Olympic Committee and the International Paralympic Committee are attempting to do here. They were building the most amazing game. They were going to be outstanding, and that was 7 years in the making. With the announcements last a few months back, they're now redoing those games. 7 years' work is now being rebuilt in 12 months and against the backdrop of a global pandemic. So from Paralympics Australia and all of our movement, we are absolutely in awe of the fact that they're even having a go at that task. And we're very much grateful, and we are convinced that if anyone can pull it off, it is the Japanese country. So we're feeling quite confident about it going ahead. And as part of our COVID mitigation planning, we've been using a biosecurity expert. He's the same gentleman that helped the NRL get off as the first sporting code in the world to get back after the COVID dramas. And he was very buoyant. He said, I have no qualms about you going to Tokyo. He said 3 reasons. 1, it's a fantastic economy, very advanced, first world country. 2, you have plenty of time. And 3, the Japanese people and the government will want to make it happen and make it happen really, really well. So that, for our board that's always looking at things with a risk lens, that gave us a whole lot of confidence. On Monday, I was at a wonderful event with my counterparts at the Australian Olympic Committee to celebrate 20 years since Sydney. And John Coates, the president of the AOC, who's also, I think, vice president of the IOC, he's really buoyant. He said their COVID planning is absolutely well underway. They're looking at various layers of the planning, but come the end of the year, he said they will decide on what level of protocols and requirements are needed, and then we go forward. So, the worst thing we can do is take our eye off that ball and allow our athletes to do that. It would be criminal if the athletes see any doubt in us and maybe drop their performance preparation and the Games go ahead. So we're really, really positive, and each day we're feeling more positive.
Yeah, and Fiona, from your perspective, I can just see that those of us who have been involved with Japan for a long time, it probably pleases us more than most. How has it been going as far as the New Zealand team is concerned and all the preparations of the stakeholders there? I don't think we've got you. Maybe on mute there.
Can you hear me now?
There we go. Got you now. Go for it.
We're in absolute awe. Hi, we're in awe of what the Japanese community is doing to set the stage for national Paralympic committees to come into Japan in a year's time. And I guess our background in Paralympic sport and the Paralympic movement has been built on the resilience and determination. And we've all had to dig in to understand what that means for us during these difficult times. We, our members, our coaches, administrators, and all our volunteers have definitely been required to draw upon that strength, look back into the resilience and the adversity that some have faced in Paralympic sport, but reuse that to be very determined and very motivated. Now, at the Paralympic Committee here at Paralympics New Zealand, we're drawing upon that strength and we're building on the momentum of what we hope will be an amazing Games in a year's time, which will set the stage and will be a bit different. We'll be able to use the power of the Paralympic Games to bring together the world again. And that's what we're really looking forward to. And we're doing everything in our best interests to support our athletes, our coaches and our teams to strive towards that.
Yeah, I think 2 words that you use there, resilience and determination. Those of us, again, who know Japan know that those 2 words really go hand in hand with Japanese culture and the DNA. recent history just shows that with some of the typhoons and also some of the natural disasters that Japanese do. And I, for one, have been absolutely astounded at the lightning speed that disability services, accessibility, and also just the community awareness of para sport have been playing such a huge part in Japanese culture. So Fiona, I'll start with you and then come back to Lynne. If you can have a little bit of a think about some of the athletes that you've got on your team. What's the size of your team across a number of different sports, and also some of the real challenges, because every single athlete is a different case, isn't it? You know, you've got a team of able-bodied people, and pretty much everybody's within a certain bandwidth, aren't they? Then you've got a para team, and that bandwidth can be triple the size.
So we've got a team, I mean, you've got to remember a team of 5 million here in New Zealand. So relatively speaking, our Paralympic Games team is relatively small, but we're looking at a team between 30 to 45 para athletes across 11 sports coming to Japan. And that team is then, as you say, supported by a number of support staff to support them in their endeavours and assist them to perform. So we're looking at a team size of an extended support up to 90, embarking upon Tokyo. And so that's, and we've been relatively successful in New Zealand. You know, we like to put out that we're looking at seeking to achieve our #1 in the world per medals per capita status that we achieved in London. We got again in Rio, and we're striving to achieve that in Tokyo as well. So our aspirations and ambitions for our team remain to be very ambitious.
So Lynne, the same with yourself. I mean, the logistics of teams at the best of times throw a lot of challenges, and the athletes that you and I have met and had the privilege of dealing with are just incredibly special people. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those challenges and, you know, getting those teams together and the way these players come together, these athletes come together?
Sure. You know, we're looking at this stage of probably taking a team of 350 away, and it'll be an even split. It'll be about 180 athletes and about similar size support staff, medical, etc. Going along. It will be across 18 sports, and our goal, our aspiration is every year since Barcelona in 1992, we've tabled in the top 5, which for our country, albeit 25 million, a bit more than Fiona's got, but still punches well above our weight to go in the top 5. And that won't be easy, you know, for very many reasons. And COVID, I suppose, has made it even harder for countries like Australia and New Zealand, where, you know, our responses have been quite good. Pull back in, but travel restrictions mean, you know, getting to qualify, then getting classification. There's quite a few challenges still for our athletes to go through, but we have faith in the International Paralympic Committee will let it happen. The athletes themselves have been extraordinary. We have a beautiful young athletics vision impaired kid, Jared Clifford, and he went to Rio, so this will be his second games if he gets selected. Oh, he has got selected actually. He selected our first 10 athletes last week, which was a really nice positive force for our athletes to say it is happening. But yeah, Jared was on a fantastic trajectory. He went as a very young, I think 16-year-old, 17-year-old to Rio. Since then, every year he's achieved another milestone, whether it was bronze the following year in the Worlds, then I think he was the first athlete with a disability to compete in a marathon in Switzerland. And then just last year, he won 2 golds and got 2 world records in Dubai at the World Championships. He was primed for Tokyo this year. And, you know, when it happened, he wrote a beautiful piece saying, you know, I've given up my teenage years for this. I know it's the right decision, but I don't think we should ever underestimate what that meant. You know, he had to take it all in, recalibrate. He's now focused again next year, but that's the roller coaster ride that our athletes have been on. As Fiona said before, if ever there's a group where you will point to at a time like this to draw, you know, inspiration from, it certainly is our para athletes. They just, you know, they don't just survive things, they adapt and thrive. So we're really excited. We've got as I said, we announced our first group this week of 10, a really stellar group, really some good men. But it was interesting, on Monday I had, I mentioned earlier, the 20th anniversary from Sydney Olympics and Sydney 2000 Olympics and Paralympics. And I was asked a question beforehand, you know, are the athletes still around? And for us, that legacy is still so strong. We have 4 athletes in the running to get selected in Tokyo. That's
Wow.
extraordinary. That means they've been at the top of their game for 20 years. And then we've got another 4 athletes who compete in Sydney that are actually on team as coaches and staff. So, you know, this movement is absolutely growing beautifully, and the athletes are the core of it.
Oh, fantastic. Wow, 20 years. That's just amazing. Now, I'm going to put you quickly both on the spot. Fiona, who have we got to look out for in your team in Tokyo next year?
Oh, we've got so many. Well, and another great positive thing is that it gives us an extra year to afford the opportunity for up and coming athletes to still be seeking to qualify. So while some of our athletes have been sort of had uncertainty or be revisiting or seeking their decisions around their career and their personal goals, we've got this other side of this great opportunity of the upper newcomers. We're really relatively strong in swimming, athletics, cycling, shooting. With the wheelchair rugby team, the Wheel Blacks, have qualified in top 8. We've still got all of our selections to come. So our athletes are still yet to be selected, Peter. I'm not a selector, but we've got a lot of athletes that were in Rio, which will be seeking to go back and reclaim their titles. And some have been like Lynne, it'll be their 4th, 5th Paralympic Games campaign. For some, it might be their swan song. It may be their final one as well. And so we'll have a team of strong individuals striving for 35 to 45 athletes, looking at delivering up to 21 medals. So relatively successful when you think about the size of the team. And look, World's your step. There'll be a lot of amazing New Zealand athletes. Encourage everyone on this call to come down and support them when we're in Tokyo, because they'll need your support as well.
And Fiona and I were talking about that how lacking in competitive DNA we have. I can't wait to see the Trans-Tasman rivalry on the wheelchair rugby court. So Lynne, who have we got to have a look at just very quickly, and then I'll move on to a slightly more deeper question.
Yeah, no, like Fiona said, a lot of them haven't been selected yet, but we know these are the athletes that we're watching out for. Wheelchair rugby, certainly. They've got a fantastic challenge. They're the reigning world champions. Oh, sorry, not reigning world champions, reigning gold medalists from Rio and London. They were world champions and we lost that to Japan only a year ago. So we're coming for that. We want that one back. So that will be a really, it'll be a good test for the guys. They've been on top for so long. There's always a bit of a changing of the guard, so I'm really excited about that one. The young kid I mentioned before, Jared Clifford, could be anything. We've got a beautiful young bocce player. Now, for those who don't know, bocce is a sport that's for probably one of our most impaired groups, and Australia traditionally hasn't been strong there. We've got a young kid called Dan Michelle, and if he gets selected, which we hope he will, we think he's a really good chance for both singles and doubles. And we've got we're strong in athletics and swimming as well. Paddleists, we've got Curtis McGrath, who's just a star in paddle. So we're looking forward to it. We're really excited. And the great thing is now, as Fiona said, there's winners and losers. There's we had a young girl like the Cauldron on Monday on our behalf, and she was injured this year, but now she's in the running to go. So, there's a lot of athletes that are out there really, really excited, I suppose, because the opportunity's there.
Yeah. It's you just can't tell, and I'm going to move on quickly as far as some of the para sports and the effect in your respective countries and the changing of society. And I spoke briefly about it, about how, and we were talking before about how far Japan has come in this particular area. But before I do, nothing. You said about afford, Fiona. Nothing happens without money, does it? And I think it's really a testimony to the partnerships that we all have and the sponsors that we all have, is that none of the partners that I understand have wavered in their support of your associations and of your organisations as you head towards Tokyo. So all of your sponsors and partners. Lynne, maybe you want to start off just quickly about that and the wonderful partners you have.
Absolutely. We've been thrilled. Every one of our sponsors has agreed to we roll the contracts forward 1 year. Our broadcast partner, fabulous Channel 7, have done exactly the same. So we're absolutely thrilled. And we're even this week close in final stages of signing a couple of new ones. So the interest is still really, really strong. And I think, at the moment, as we look around us, in the world, what we are seeing is a real need for, even businesses are recognising that need for community to come together to help each other. I read an article the other day about the absolute threefold increase in the amount of money that's going into social impact investments. So I think what we're seeing is that companies are saying, yes, we want to get, bottom line profits and we might want to get exposure or whatever, but we love that we can bring your athletes into our offices and talk to our people, engage with us, have come and try days. So I think there's something really unique that, fortunately for us, that the corporates are, seeing value in it, and we need it because, our only sources of funding primarily are government. We don't get regular funding every year for games, and the rest is on corporate. So we're so grateful for their support.
And Fiona?
Amazing support, and it's like you have an extended team. We've got relatively small teams in our Paralympic committees, and so by utilising our partnerships, we feel that our teams grow extensively. We've been really well supported. We've worked hard as an organisation to deliver value and looked at how rights might be utilised in a different way. We've utilised this time to create digital content and reached out to our partners, staff and customers with messages from our Paralympians, and also the experts that support our Paralympians that sometimes you perhaps don't hear from. So like the team psychologist and their perspective, who've sort of shared their experience around the mental strength and resilience, the ability to cope with change. And also some light-hearted content about what the little things are that get you through the day. And we've had some amazing examples of our athletes training from home in their home environments and adapting their home environments accordingly. And I think, we've also worked really hard with our partners. We're doing a celebration project event in New Zealand at the moment, and it's celebrating the legacy of the Paralympic movement. So during the lockdown in New Zealand, we did a huge shout out for all those Paralympians that we could not find, of our 209 that we were looking for, that we still were yet to find. That helped us generate a lot of content for our partners, as well as the pins, the celebration project, and presenting our 209 Paralympians with their pins. For those that can't actually attend events, we're going on the road. So Paralympics New Zealand and our Toyota vehicles partner are doing an on-the-road initiative. And so we're filming, going visiting our Paralympians and sharing their stories with the New Zealand public. So we've really taken the opportunity just to do things differently. Try to think a little bit outside the square, think innovatively, whilst still providing the hope and aspiration and sharing the importance and the power that Paralympic sport has to shift the minds of people, help create a more diverse and inclusive New Zealand for all, and utilising that momentum for social change through this period of time. And our partners are 101% behind us to help share those messages.
Isn't that great? Isn't that great that nobody's wavering? And I know that that's not the case all around the world at the moment, but it's fantastic to see that those supporters are there. The effect of para sports and what it has, the effect that it has on society and the way in which it can gel people together. Japan as a society is, the diversity and inclusion variables in that society are increasing on a day-to-day basis. And you've both visited the Para Support Centre in Tokyo, which is all around galvanising para sports and galvanising the community. And I love seeing their buses go around and their community involvement and their things like that. Lynne, can I just have a quick chat to you just about sort of the community involvement and para sports? Because I know you're taking those things in, taking para sports into the schools is having life-changing effect on children.
Absolutely. And just a quick shout out. We love what Japan's done with their Nippon Foundation, and we're actually using it as a model for some of the work that we're talking to government and corporate partners about. I think they have absolutely led the way for us all there. In terms of our community, we had some beautiful programs that we're kicking off, new programs, re-energised programs, probably started 1 or 2 weeks before COVID. So there were some interesting challenges there. Certainly, our beautiful partner, Meat and Livestock, have partnered with our education program. But, we've just shifted to online delivery. We've done virtual classrooms. People are doing letter writing to the athletes and wishing them all the best. And the response is just overwhelming always from it. We were just rolling out some fantastic come and try days. So they're on the shelf, ready to roll out again. But what we do know is that the power of parasports that Fiona alluded to before, we think is getting better. Our movement is on an absolutely amazing upward trajectory. And what I love is that the International Paralympic Committee shares, I know Fiona and I are the same here, shares this vision that we have that our athletes don't just inspire people with a disability, they inspire all people. And we have this power to absolutely make really positive social change. So the International Paralympic Committee in the last 12 months has done a fantastic deal with the United Nations to assist in delivering sustainable development goals. And just this week announced a partnership with the International Disability Alliance. So we're spreading our wings using parasport. Parasport is a vehicle that shows people what you can do, what you can't do. And we're absolutely passionate about sharing that with as many people as possible.
I think if we can just quickly talk about the wonderful anniversary and the 20 years down now from the Paralympics Games in Sydney, and just the really great coverage that we've been getting on Channel 7 throughout the week, and the event that you went to. If I go back even further than that, the history of the games in Japan, and we look at there's a very important part that Japan has to play, because the 1964 Tokyo Paralympic Games was just a huge success, and all pretty much brought about by one man, Dr. Nakamura from Oita, of all places, and the first Paralympic Games or Paralympic Sports Festival was played in Oita in Japan, and then it went on from there. And one of the great successes was the support of the then prince, which then became the emperor, Akihito, and it was just a wonderful experience. 20 years now that we've had that event, what was the feeling like out at Olympic Park, and how would have brought back some great memories?
It did, and I think that I was asked what was my key memory, and the key one is just pride across so many areas. I wasn't around for the days of Atlanta in '96, but everybody tells me they were terrible. They were really disrespectful in many ways to our athletes. It was like they were an afterthought. And so Sydney was the next one after that, and our local organising committee, led by my beautiful friend Lois Appleby, were absolutely determined that they're the first organising committee that joined both, so the Olympics and Paralympics were together in Sydney, and they were committed to providing that equity of sort of opportunity. But more importantly, what they wanted to do was to redefine the level of professionalism that should go into a Paralympic Games. They aren't an afterthought. They're an absolute amazing event in our own right. And from what they tell me now, I believe London, and we talk about the Trans-Tasman rivalry, Aussies have a pretty good rivalry with our friends in the British Isles, and we were told that they used us as a motivating model. And, Rio, I think, took it to another level just because of the way they survived, what could have brought a lot of people down. And Tokyo, I have no doubt, we want everyone to keep building on that level. So I think the key legacy for me out of that was the fact that they took it to another level, and then that was globally for the movement. Within Australia, I still have so many people come up and say, I went to those games as a school kids, because they did a great program through the schools. The first day that we turned up, they knew that it would be successful with the kids. They didn't anticipate how successful it was with the general public. We had to put a shout out, help, SOS, send more buses to come along and deal with the crowds. So it was just really, really proud moment for Sydney. And it wasn't a hard act to follow. Sydney Olympic Games were outstanding. The Kathy Freeman moments, there's so many. But the Paralympics did it. They stood up in our own inimitable way.
And speaking about that, in many ways, and I do hope that a lot of people have seen Rising Phoenix, and it is it is an incredible documentary that focuses not on parasport but on human spirit, and also with the reference to the Rio Games. Now, Fiona, your experience at Rio, was it disconcerting at the beginning there, and then to see just everything come together in such a way that it did? It must have been just an incredible experience.
Yeah, well, first of all, if you haven't seen Rising Phoenix, watch it. Amazing, compelling movie telling the story of the founder of the Paralympic movement, Sir Ludwig Gutmann, and then following some amazing para-athletes through their journey. It does talk about the issues heading into Rio and the potential that the Paralympic Games may not go ahead due to funding. Was that a concern for us at the time? Huge concern. Our athletes are people had spent years training for this one moment, and all of a sudden we were unsure it was going to happen. The amount of communications that we had during that time period to understand, both from the International Paralympic Committee and the work that they were doing with the local organising committee, as well as providing and feeding that back down to our people here in New Zealand, was incredibly important. And not dissimilar to when the Tokyo 2020 Paralympic Games were postponed and having those same communications. But you know, the Zika, the no money, this might happen, that might not happen. We got there, and yes, the stadiums were quite empty when we first arrived from a spectator perspective. But you know what? The word of the Paralympic movement got out, and over time you could just see building to then, in some cases, full stadia. And for our athletes, you know, they want to compete. They want to compete in front of a lot of people. We had a lot of global attention on Rio, and a lot of media that had obviously committed to showcasing this, the world event. And all of a sudden, you know, the athletes, as they always do, performed. That brought in the crowds. Everything else was then forgotten about, and those special moments were created for our para-athletes. And goodness, you know, well done IPC and the Rio Organising Committee for enabling and allowing that opportunity, because the world would have missed out if that hadn't have happened.
Yeah, so
now, I might just add, Fiona, remember, sorry, Peter, just to interrupt there, and it wasn't actually in the movie, and I was sort of, in hindsight, I wish it had been. Let's not forget also another major drama unfolded around the same time, which was the Russian doping crisis. So this little International Paralympic Committee was dealing with, are we going to go ahead? All the money's gone. How can we fix this? And then an issue came up, and Fiona and I have talked about this often. We're just so proud that the IPC stood up and said, no, sorry. You've broken the rules. You can't compete, and that wasn't the case elsewhere. So when I look back now, you know, Sir Philip Craven, Javi Gonzalez, Andrew Parsons, that was incredible pressure. So against the backdrop of these multiple major issues, they pulled off the games. And remember, Fiona, that Super Saturday, it was the first Saturday of second Saturday of the events. We had the biggest crowd of either events, either Olympics or Paras, and being in the stadium that day, just walking around, seeing gorgeous young Brazilian kids with disabilities. Their parents had brought them out. It was just a festival. It was beautiful.
Yeah. And that is going to be by a multiple in Tokyo. I can feel it already.
Awesome.
And I know that the Japanese people and people, every part of community and every part of that culture will be out in force and supporting. Let's talk a little bit about 2021 and the games in Tokyo. Obviously the COVID protocols, etc. The organising committee just recently meeting and with some 50 to 60 items that may be in the budget cutting process, plus also how we're dealing with the actual athletes and coming in, and we're looking at sometimes even athletes being tested up to 5 times. Fiona and Lynne, your thoughts on that coming into, and you mentioned this is one of the areas that the community of people involved with the Australia, Japan and New Zealand relationship, maybe the ones as we understand what we know more about going in, as we know more about going into Tokyo 2021, what it is we need and what we need from our friends.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, at the moment, with the Tokyo 2020 knowledge that's coming down to Paralympics New Zealand, I guess the forefront is sort of qualification and the ability to travel to enter international qualification, secure much needed qualification slots for nations, and enable us to get out of New Zealand and we'll get people into New Zealand. So we'll be heading into qualification and selection timeframes. We're in qualification now and selection from March to June. So that's a key priority, but our COVID scenario planning, as you can imagine, is huge. You know, based upon that 50 that have come out, you know, what does it mean for us? It might mean that we've got to have individual apartments outside the village for individuals with singles, so that's double the cost all of a sudden for us. It might mean that we have to organise our own transport to move people around in our bubbles, therefore that's an additional cost with regards to cars, and then of course then you need people to drive the cars. And then we've even considered having our own bubbles within the village environment, therefore no longer going to the dining hall, but ensuring that you've got all your food in your apartment. And so, and of course you can hear the ding, ding, ding ring bells going up each time you're looking at each one of those scenarios, including the potential for quarantining in Japan, quarantining back in New Zealand. So I guess for us, we're taking full consideration of those core countermeasures that the organising committee are looking at, and cross-examining that as to what that might mean for our preparations for our athletes and for our team that heads into Tokyo, because I mean athlete well-being is at the front of our minds, is to support them, and then also supporting the best environment for them to participate and compete in.
Lynne, given everything,
I agree with that, Fiona. Yep.
Yeah, go ahead, Lynne.
Yeah, just going to say that the planning is part of me is loves this idea. You know, we've got a massive challenge. I love the idea of trying to come together and solve it, and it is a behemoth. There's no doubt about that. So, for example, in Australia, what we're talking to now is we're planning obviously on 2 weeks quarantine before and after the game. So, whereas we would have staff away for potentially 4 weeks, that could be 8 weeks. Now, you know, our chief medical officer, our dietitian, all of those, 8 weeks is a long time to be away from your family, be away from your practice where you're really earning money elsewhere. So even aside from the health considerations, it's, you know, so we're looking at it in pillars actually. There's a medical health side, which I actually think will be reasonably, I wouldn't say easy, but we'll know that there'll be very strict guidelines that will come out of Tokyo, and then also our own government here. It's the broader part, which I call, we have a work, you know, WHS responsibility. This is our people. Our team that we are taking away. So there's another layer there of compliance and risk. You've also got them, because they're Australian citizens coming out of the country, you know, we're working closely with GFAT, Federal Police, Department of Foreign Affairs, everything. So there's a whole lot of pillars that we're looking at, which is, as I said, it's quite fascinating and interesting. And we're lucky because we've had some of the sports in Australia. So we're talking to netball. They currently have their bubbles up on the Gold Coast. As I said earlier, the rugby league's different in that it was a home to training to playing bubble, but still we want to know from their learnings, what have you learned that we can put into place? And then, you know, our team usually meets us in the games. So all the sports might be staging camp or wherever elsewhere, and we meet in the village. So they come home in a charter, but we're saying now we may well have to look at 18 fly in and fly out sports, you know, so flying everyone depending on it. We've been looking at that. We're doing a massive exercise at the moment, tracking the logistics of what that might look like. And fortunately, in a way, I think 14 of the 18 sports will nearly be there right to the end. So we may still be able to bring the charter home, which is actually a beautiful part. That's a memory and experience where you come back as a team and you land in the country. But, you know, we may be precluded from it because of, you know, medical and quarantine requirements.
And we're, as you say, we've got, you know, nearly every member of both teams, etc. There's very few professionals within those ranks, etc. So it's, you know, it's time off work, and it's time off those things which are putting food on the table, so to speak, and it's their dream. So look, we'll move on just very quickly to a couple of quick questions. I wanted to ask a little bit about the research and innovation side of things. I know, and this is first one from me, and then I'll run to a few questions from our attendees. But Lynne, research and innovation, as you spoke about a very quick, the way in which Parasports and your innovation and research team and the way that they've worked with all the athletes, etc. Of course, as I mentioned before, if you've got an able-bodied team, you know, you're jumping on a plane, you're getting into a seat. You were speaking a little bit before about some of the research that we really take for granted when you've got a team of para-athletes and the different needs that everybody has when they're traveling, when they're, etc., and the medical needs, the support needs, all those things, etc. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Absolutely. I started just before Rio, and I'm still on a learning curve about the needs of people with disability. But one of the things that fascinated me in Rio, we were doing an exercise together with our beautiful partner Qantas, and it was an individual seating exercise because the research told us that people with disability didn't travel well on a long haul flight. So essentially, you know, our scientists working closely with the Institute of Sport, the AIS, we came up with, you know, heat mapping, if you like, of everyone's own bum, and you had a personal cushion that you could take away. Now, that kind of research has applications commercially and beyond. So I remember thinking, wow, this little organisation, Paralympics Australia, is doing some really cool research. And for Rio, we had a case where we had our best candidate for a medal in table tennis, and we hadn't won a medal in 32 years. Lived in South Australia, but because of the nature of disability, he had to stay at home with his family. The best coach was in Melbourne. So we just did a very rudimentary iPad, Wi-Fi. We connected the coach and the athlete, and he went on to win our first medal, which was fantastic, a silver medal. Optus, our partner, said, we really like that. We're going to support you and put some more investment behind it. And just before COVID hit, we called it Paralympics Connect, and this app is available on the App Store for our athletes. And so, of course, the fact that it's a remote coaching tool meant that as soon as COVID hit, we were inundated with opportunities where our sports wanted it, so their coaches could talk to their athletes. Off the back of that, we're collecting performance data and analysing it in a way that we would never have done before. And we're also doing our coaches across sport are getting together and talking just because they're using this app. So there's some really great work that's being done in this world of Paralympics. And luckily for us, our sponsors love it too.
Oh, great. Great. And Fiona, from your aspects, you know, I know it's a smaller team, etc., but the innovation and research, you know, necessity being the mother of invention. How do you feel about the improvements in those areas? And you know, you look at the facilities, well, I suppose the equipment that we're using in parasports so many years ago, as compared to what we're using now, and it's really light year ahead.
Yeah, well, there's always been potentially limited research in Paralympic sport, and that, excitingly, is really growing. So more and more institutions around the world are seeking the opportunity to advance Paralympic sport and through research. So that's really exciting, and we're finding the same in New Zealand through a number of universities seeking to advance Paralympic sport here in New Zealand. Of course, innovation is always going to be a competitive advantage, and certainly the innovation that goes into supporting our athletes, not only with the equipment and the likes of a wheelchair rugby chair or a tandem cycle or any cycle, is also the prosthetic developments that take place and the modifications that help an individual, not necessarily in the competitive environment, but assists them in their strength and conditioning from a training environment, and modifications and innovation that can really enhance the ability to strengthen or condition a particular part of the body. So we're seeing some great strides being made in that area, but excitingly, a lot more people really interested in helping us to try and look at working with our athletes, identify what the problem is, and coming up with a great solution. We call it the 8 wire in New Zealand, you know, we really want to further develop everyone to have the 8 wire concept, but certainly a huge competitive advantage with regards to the innovation and innovation and research vastly increasing. Again, it needs partners to help us to achieve that, and that's where we're forever grateful for the current PNZ partners that we have that are having and affording us the ability to extend ourselves as an organisation and ultimately afford our people with assistance.
We were lucky enough to have two of our para athletes in the documentary Rising Phoenix, which was just incredible. But I can't stop thinking about the young man from Burundi and who the prosthetic legs that were able to literally get him running like a cheetah. And it was, I challenge anybody to watch that and not be moved. It was just an incredibly special moment. A couple of quick questions from our attendees, and the first one is on the pathways to Tokyo. As you mentioned, Fiona, the team hasn't been selected. Qualification is still is ongoing. So the athletics, for example, is in Sydney in March 2021. So and I'll just read this out for Lynne, I think, basically. But if you've got anything, please, Fiona, about the qualification process. As we head down the path to Tokyo in 2021, what are the ways an athlete can still gain national selection? E.g., are nationals for athletics still to be held in Sydney in March 2021? After that, what does the pathway look like?
From our personal point of view, obviously we're saying yes, things are, but depending on situations. But in terms of qualification or the all-important classification as well, Fiona and I just signed off on a request to actually get additional classification opportunities in this region. And it's not just for us, Australia and New Zealand. We've got, we're very proud members of our Oceania Paralympic Committee, and there's, lots of the smaller islands who actually, they can't afford to be getting overseas. So we're pushing really hard for more classification slot. The classification mandate is that they will only do it now for athletes who are in contention for the games. So that instead of being distracted on a more longer term prospects, they're at least limiting that. But we haven't really been given much details yet, have we, Fiona? I mean, the nationals, as I said, at this stage will still go ahead, subject to, we've got issues in Australia like borders and, being closed. So it's still a bit of an unknown, but that I just have faith, the IPC will have to mandate a level of fair competition, whether that be the qualifications or the classifications. So, we can't see a spate of qualification events in Europe, which is often the case with a bit of a Eurocentric attitude. Fiona and I really fly that flag pretty hard, don't we? So Fiona, do you want to add any more in terms of the certainty around that?
Yeah, I mean, we're working really hard with our national sports organisations like Australia to ensure that their national events can go ahead in the environment that we're currently working at. But, who knows that right now? We're certainly working towards that. International travel, Australia, New Zealand, the rest of the world. We will be working with government and MFAT with regards to what that means for our people to be moving in and out of the country for qualification events. Some of our sports have already qualified slots, but for some sports we haven't qualified slots. So we'll be awaiting from the International Federation as to what that might mean with regards to even selecting, having athletes to be considered for selection for qualification. So there's still a lot of uncertainties in addition to us advocating for classification in Australia and New Zealand and the importance for that, given that's fundamental, is ensuring that our athletes are in the right classification to compete in Tokyo.
And there has been a lot of work done already. I noticed one of the questions around the Tasman bubble, and that was actually looking really positive. And then with the flare-up that happened recently, in the last few months in Melbourne, it's been put on hold. But together with the AOC, we've been working really closely with DFAT. So there is a plan and a template there. So I'm pretty certain if as long as we keep continuing to control the virus like it appears we're starting to get, I think that one can be resurrected pretty quickly, can't it, Fiona? That wouldn't take much.
Yeah, absolutely. And we would certainly harness that opportunity to seek what opportunities that might be, even from a training environment perspective as well, considering that, you know, it's relatively cool here in New Zealand. Our expectations in Tokyo, it's going to be much warmer for our athletes, and looking at replicating those environments, we may need to go up north in Australia to get some of those opportunities as well.
Yeah, trust me, Fiona, anywhere north of us in Australia is not going to be as hot as Tokyo at that time of the year. That's coming from personal experience. Look, I'm very conscious of time. I'm going to finish up in just a moment. I want to ask a couple of quick questions. Firstly, I want to apologise to Fiona because I didn't get a chance to read your bio because we had a couple of those video issues, etc. So I'm going to very quickly do that, and then we're going to finish off with a quick look at how the Australia, Japan and Australia, New Zealand society, and as I said, we've got a lot of attendees here today, are all very passionate about the relationship between Japan and our respective countries. We don't know what we don't know at the moment, but we know that we've got an army of people here that are looking to help you, and we really need that we sort of work together and put our thinking caps on. But very quickly, Fiona, and I apologise profusely because I got a little thrown with the video problems, etc. But Fiona, you've excelled here. But I will actually send everybody the bio later, but I just did want to say I love anybody that can get in craft brewery and bars plus dogs in their own bio. I think it's just an incredible thing. Look, being an executive member of the Carbine Club of New Zealand, and I know we've got some Carbine Club of Tokyo members on the line now, is certainly a big feather in your cap. But there's too many accolades here. The Order of New Zealand, a member of Order of Merit, is just an amazing feat. And that bio is, and I will send it around. I'm sorry we don't have time to finish it off completely here. I will, on that particular point, the last comment from both of you. We have a number of members headed, and a number of my good friends who form up the advisory team for Tokyo 2020 for the Olympics and Paralympics game. I won't even try that acronym, but some of the smartest people and some of the most experienced people in the relationships between Australia and Japan, and also the ANZCCJ for their support. They're the people who really, we are the ones who are facilitators, problem solvers. We're able to create relationships between the countries and make things happen. And we are the ones that really want to make sure that this Games, let's say I'm a little bit biased, is the best Games ever since Sydney 2000. But geez, Japan's my second home, and I wouldn't mind if it even exceeded that. But so before, during and after Tokyo, and I'll start with Lynne. I know you don't know everything at the moment. It's still an unknown, but when we get together next, etc., what is it you need and how can we help?
Exactly. I think there's sort of two angles there. As I said, there's definitely, I believe, will be opportunities for, the people of Japan to get involved with us through their companies. So once we know exactly where we'll be located, are we going to do staging camp in Kobe? We've got a school that we had for family and friends in Harumi School in Shuo Ward. Once we start to have an understanding of can we go ahead with them still, then I'm sure there'll be opportunities. So we'd be really grateful that anyone that was happy to share an email address with us, that we can certainly keep in touch once we get to know more of the requirements that'll come through from the organising committee. But in Australia on the ground, and I'm sure it's the same in New Zealand, we just really believe that our movement is in a beautiful place. We think there's some really fantastic opportunities. We've got lofty goals. We really do want to make the world a better place through the inspiration of our Paralympians. And we just think anyone that is interested, we believe our community pillars, our research and innovation, there's just so much opportunity because it is a fresh brand. It's a beautiful brand. And I think at a time like now, as I said earlier, this area where people are looking to bring people together through a shared purpose, with real social impact, I think we're a platform that can actually do that. So we welcome anyone who may want to have that conversation with us. And
one of our favourite words in Japan is collaboration. The way in which we're able to make partnerships with like-minded bodies and to really achieve amazing things. Fiona?
Yeah, for us, it's to work with the members and stakeholders on this call, not only as we work towards the Paralympic Games, which is, of course, a great showcase of Paralympic sport, but also those that are generally interested in promoting accessibility and social inclusion within your market. And we talk at New Zealand, Paralympics New Zealand, about transforming lives through parasport. And so whatever that might mean for the individual at whatever connection point. So seeking if there's an opportunity to work with members and the stakeholders to get those messages around the opportunity that parasport does have to transform lives, but not only at the Paralympic Games, as I mentioned, but through everyday lives in communities. And we're already seeing some of that great shift in Japan around more acceptance, more inclusivity of disabled people, more accessibility. And so how can we further enhance that and grow it with the momentum? Of course, we'll be looking for support on the ground in Tokyo to assist us with logistics and help us create a New Zealand away from New Zealand home with the Japanese community. So if there's support there, we would really appreciate that. But ultimately, like Lynne says, we're in this for the long haul. We love our brand. We love the people that we work with. We love what the Paralympic movement, the story that it has, the story it tells, and the power it has to shift people's perceptions towards those living with a disability in New Zealand, in societies. So any insights or thoughts that attendees of this call may have of interactions, experiences that both Lynne and I can help enhance that, then we would love to talk with them and seek how we can further to collectively, in partnership, in collaboration, do something really great.
And you couldn't do it with a better partner than in Japan. And so I think, and you see it in Japan every day. Just yesterday, it was on the nightly news. There it was, Shingo Kunieda winning his 24th Grand Slam wheelchair tennis title at the US Open. So it's certainly going leaps and bounds in Japan. I'm going to hand over to my very learned colleague, Ian Scott, to finish off officially. On my behalf, from Paralympics Australia and also from NZ or Paralympics New Zealand. We couldn't have done this without the work of ANZCCJ and also Emily at the ANZCCJ Secretariat, who does a mountain of work there in the relationship between Australia and New Zealand and Japan. So Ian, over to you.
Thanks, Peter. That was excellent. Look, all I want to say is on behalf of, everyone who was involved today and the ANZCCJ, I wanted to provide a really big thank you to Lynne and Fiona for your time, your enthusiasm, your passion is incredible, and also your frankness on the issues facing the organisation. I'm motivated, I want to join, and I want to help.
Right.
It must be so good working with the para athletes, and in my opinion, you have the dream jobs. So, look, I wish you all the best. We look forward to seeing you and the athletes next year. And look, I will be in the stands if we're allowed to, okay? Yeah. I also want to thank Peter again. Thank you very much for being in the media today. A special thank you to Emily and Aki for their organisation. And to everyone, please stay tuned on any other upcoming webinars with the ANZCCJ. If you missed anything today, this has been recorded and is available on the ANZCCJ website. Again, everybody, thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.